Rhythm up.
Woo! Come on, you got it.
Good.
Come on, woo! You did that.
Shop now at hydro.co.uk.
Hello there and welcome. I'm Martin Cross and with me is Camilla Hadland. And on this grey Sunday afternoon, we are excited because we're going to brighten it up by showing you, thanks to Ludum, one of the boat race fixtures. Oxford University Women's Boat Club are up against the might of Leander in two series of races, both from the start to Hammersmith Bridge. This is the first of a number of fixtures that will bring you courtesy of Ludum ahead of the Gemini boat race. And we'll talk you through the crews, give you the lowdown on who's racing who, and then we will switch to our live coverage. Very exciting to see just how the crews fare in these conditions, which are gusty, breezy, 40 miles an hour gusts from the southwest. Yeah, it's enough to make even the most brave rower feel a little bit faint-hearted, but these women are going to be going into the teeth of the wind. Who's racing, Camilla? Talk us through.
Well, yeah, we've got two extremely strong crews going up against each other today in this fixture. We'll start with having a look through who we've got lining up in the Oxford University women's crew. Now, Oxford, a late change this morning. We were expecting Christine Cavallo in the 3-seat for Oxford, but a last-minute change has seen her subbing out in favour of Olivia Farrow. We'll wait to hear any news on why that is, but that change was announced this morning. But we'll take you through both crews in just a moment's time. They'll be going up against the mighty Leander Club, really prestigious and strong outfit, and certainly getting stronger and stronger under the leadership of Ross Hunter. And the crew that we've got lining up has got multiple under 23 medalists in, multiple international caps. I think it's going to be one for the ages, Crossy.
Yeah, it certainly will be. I'm really interested to see just how this Oxford University women's crew does against Leander. I would have thought Leander were marginal favourites, but then you look at the core of that Oxford women's eight, you've kind of got Anastasia Posner in the 5-seat. You've got the Canadian Olympian Gabrielle Smith in the 6-seat. American 2018 world champion in the women's fours, Erin Relick in the 7th seat. I mean, even, there's a lot of grunt in the middle of that boat. And you've got someone like Amelia Standing up in the 2 seat, who's an under 23 world champion. There is, a lot to admire in that Oxford University Women's Boat Club 8.
Absolutely, Crossy. I think that it would have been a really hard choice to select a top 9, as it were, for this crew for the fixtures. And most of that work would have come off the back of seat racing, some of the earlier testing in the season. But of course, from the trial-8s that Oxford University Women's Boat Club and Cambridge Women had to postpone due to COVID in December, they took place in January. And we're going to see in just a second how that went with speed versus style.
Our first real test on the tideway between 2 ideally perfectly evenly matched crews.
Just going after it, knowing we're the same speed.
I was actually really nervous for it.
The most nervous I've been for a race in quite a long time.
Any chance you have to line up on the start line, I think it's a good time to have a go. The start was really fast, really competitive. For a lot of the race, we were pretty even. Partway through Surrey Bend, I think we started to move a bit.
We started moving back on them, and I think we had really good momentum. We were kind of just sitting up, chipping the boat along.
I think that was probably the most defining moment.
Well, they were able to really keep the hammer down when they were under pressure. The Coxes did a good job. They managed the racing situations very well. Their situational awareness was good during the race.
Between now and the boat race is a really unique opportunity to work really hard and push ourselves every day, every stroke, every training.
I'm really excited to race.
Not a question of if, it's a question of how fast are we going to be able to go on that day.
Yeah, wasn't that exciting, Camilla, to see that? Really whetted the appetite. And those 2 crews, speed and style, had a great race, just 1 length difference between them. And this afternoon, you got quite a few from that style crew, the winning crew, stroked by Annie Anzakis. But you'll tell us about the Oxford and Leander crews, Camilla.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Crossy. A lot of athletes from the sort of stern 4 of that winning crew style being replicated here in Andy Nelder's Oxford University women's crew to face Leander. So let's take a look at the lineup for both crews. So starting from bow, Julia Lindsay sits in the bow seat, learned to row at college in Oxford. Learned to row at college in Canada, and was in the blue boat back in 2021. So a returning blue here for Oxford in the bow seat. At 2, this year's president for OUWBC, Amelia Standing. We heard about her really strong reputation, an under-23 champion last year in 2021 in the women's 4 for Great Britain, and a 3-time blue, one of the most decorated blues going up in this year's fixture series. At 3, this is the late change that we've had. Olivia Farah comes in place of Christine Cavallo. Olivia Farah, the US lightweight, an under-23 lightweight for the US team back in 2019, a Harvard graduate who comes into the boat for that late change. Sitting in front of her in the 5 seat, Anya Zafus, another returning blue, a hugely experienced American rower who will be a real foundation in the middle of the boat there. She returns from 2021, yet another dark blue looking to defend her seat in this crew. Next up in front of her, another returning blue. And when we talk about decorated athletes, I think Anastasia Posner is one of the most decorated boat race athletes across the board, across any of the four kind of units that complete the boat race. She's a returning blue from the 2013 to 2016 season, where she was victorious on a number of occasions and unfortunately missed those Tokyo 2020 Olympics due to COVID, but she's back now. She's back rowing and studying once again at Pembroke College for her medical degree. So huge amount of experience there in the 5-seat for Oxford. She's then got in front of her, talking of Olympians, Gabrielle Smith, the Canadian that came 6th in the women's double this year over in Tokyo. And I say this year, I mean last year, of course, at those delayed Olympic Games. A sculler now coming to stamp her mark within sweep here over in the UK. And in front of her, another North American, Erin Relich. Now, I know Crossy did a great interview with Erin not so long ago. Started as a cox and then moved into rowing and found something good and eventually built her way to being a world champion for the US in 2018 in the women's 4. She will sit in that 7-seat, setting the rhythm alongside Annie Anazakis, the Australian who will stroke this crew. And we'll move to Annie's profile in just a second. There you go. So Annie Anazakis, the Australian who rowed over at Mercantile in the States, another Princeton University graduate, the same as Erin Relich. So a Princeton Stern pair setting the rhythm for you here. And again, the stroke of the victorious style crew from the Oxford University Women's Trial 8s. The cox for this crew to round off this dark blue lineup, Joe Gellert, the British cox, who was in Osiris last year in 2021. The Hamptonian looks to take charge of Oxford's leading lineup at this point in the season. Can he hang on to this cox's seat? He obviously made a great impression in that style crew at Trial 8. They'll be facing a very strong crew from Leander Crossy, but I mean, looking on paper, I think huge amounts of experience there at a sort of senior international level from across the globe for Oxford.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. I think Erin Relich, the 2018 American World Champion, wasn't in the Trial 8s. I think her course had started early, and I don't think she could have the time off because they got switched to January. So I guess this will be her first experience racing in an 8 on the tideway in anger. I shouldn't think it'll phase her at all with her experience. And I'm really interested to see how that Stern pair combination or Stern sort of 3 combination, even 4 combination, Posner, Smith, Relich and Anazakis go. It's going to be exciting to watch.
It is going to be very exciting to watch. But in turn, we've got a hugely strong lineup from Leander. We're getting reports that Leander have potentially lost a fin out there in those choppy conditions on the tideway whilst preparing for the start. So we'll have to see if that might delay us ever so slightly. But in the meanwhile, before we sort of jump to the live footage and see how Leander are getting on, let's tell you who's in the Leander crew. Taking on those dark blues. So in the bow seat for Leander, Annie Campbell-Ord, the Nottingham Rowing Club rower who won the Forwards Head earlier this season on the same course, obviously just in reverse for Leander early in the season. She'll be holding down the bow seat. In front of her, Tash Harris-White, a very decorated domestic athlete, multiple wins at Henley Women's Regatta, usually to be found in a sculling boat, I would say, Tash Harris-White, as well as a sweep boat, but a really, again, experienced athlete, home course over in Henley. She learnt to row Upper Thames, so venturing over to the tideway here to try and put their mark on this particular fixture. A little bit more a little bit more Oxford to go into this race, because Juliet Perry learned to row at Somerville College, Oxford, and now going up against them here. She moved to Leander after graduating and having raced in the Blue Boat back in 2018. So this will be really quite nerve-wracking for her, I'm sure, going up against her alma mater. And a winner of the Henley Royal Regatta this year, as per many of these athletes in the Leander crew, who had an absolutely storming Henley Royal Regatta. This unit of the women's squad of Leander, just really, really formidable. So Juliet Perry will be joined in this next pair by Izzy Powell. Izzy Powell, lots of tideway experience. She'll be returning back to where she learnt to row, which was at the University College London, who train on the tideway. And she, again, you can see from her results list, lots of accolades at student rowing. FISU, the World University Championships there, a gold back in 2018, multiple golds at the British University Championships. And again, much like Tash Harris-White, lots of domestic wins at Henley Women's Regatta. But I'm sure it will be her tideway experience that will be utilised during this next hour or so. Izzy Powell is joined by yet another Izzy Hawes in the 5 seat for Leander. Another Henley winner, Henley Royal Regatta winner. I must clarify, the Island Challenge Cup for Oxford Brookes, and having since now moved to Leander after graduating from Oxford Brookes, she's picked up this place here in the Leander top crew. A European bronze medalist from the European under-23s in the women's 4, so yet more international caps here lining up for Leander. At 6, Susie Deer making a return for Leander. She spent the last 6 months out with illness, unable to race, unable to compete for Leander, but she's back in the boat, and again, really spurred on by her bronze medal at last year's 3rd World Cup of the season at Sabaudia. They had an absolutely fantastic season. This development group, the sort of, Tokyo and beyond, the Project Paris group that Susie's been part of, building towards the next Olympics. It's great to see her back in the boat after all of that success last year. Daisy Bellamy, another Oxford Brookes University graduate, the other university in Oxford, and she'll be really pleased to be alongside a fellow Brookes graduate in Susie Deer, sitting and backing her up behind her in the 6th seat. Another gold medalist from the under-23s last year in the women's 4. That was a really huge performance from them to come back from some lesser performances through the heats and the semis at the under-23s to produce that fantastic gold medal. She stroked that crew to victory, and she sits here in the 7th seat for Leander. Ahead of her, stroking this crew, Meg Slabbert, the British athlete that, again, multiple accolades under 23 level, at university level. She produced a silver medal at the under 23s in the women's 8, where she sat in the bow seat. So she's back up at the other end of the boat now, setting the rhythm rather than following it. So it'll be great to see what she can do here. And again, having rowed at the University of London last year, having someone in the stroke seat that knows what a beast the tideway can be, especially in the conditions we potentially have coming up with this really strong sort of 40-odd mile-an-hour wind. It's, I think, really vital that they've got somebody who understands what that can do sat there in the stroke seat. She'll be looking at a Paralympic champion in the cox's seat, Erin Kennedy here, returning to Leander to cox this crew. Of course, a former Blue herself, having represented Oxford University Women's Boat Club while she was at university. Back in the 2014 boat races, she then went on to win yet another huge gold medal for Great Britain at Tokyo at the Paralympic Games, coxing the PR3 mixed 4. So that is your Leander lineup, and those are your numbers head to head for this fixture that will be taking place hopefully in the next 15 minutes, and we'll bring you any sort of updates or reports as to how Leander are getting on with that lost fin.
Yeah, that's the real issue, the fin, because we just had to replace a fin on the boats that we used, the Mulsey Masters crew, the leg ends. And it wasn't a straightforward process. We kind of had to order a fin. There should be a boatman going with the Oxford University Women's Boat Club, and the boatman will have spares in his spares box, and hopefully he's skilled in replacing fins. It should just be a matter of undoing the screw at the bottom of the boat that holds the fin in and resetting a new one in. But I reckon that's going to be a 15-minute delay, as you said, Camilla, to the race. And I guess, then that'll be experienced, particularly for these Oxford women, on kinds of things that could go wrong in the boat race. If you don't know, if you're watching this and you're not experienced in terms of rowing, welcome to this production from Ludum, who are bringing you, or will be bringing you, live pictures of the fixtures in ahead of Gemini boat race coming up in April this year. And welcome to you. If you're not experienced in rowing, if you're just interested, it's great to have you with us. But the lack of a fin really is quite serious, particularly for the cocks, because it just means the boat won't go straight. The fin sets the boat straight, and in terms of with the nuances of the rudder, Camilla, it's going to be a real issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it holds the boat in a straight line, and like you say, the coxes really rely on it, but it also keeps the boat nice and level as well, right? It sort of acts as a bit of a keel to ensuring that that boat stays level. And so we'll have to see. Hopefully it will be it fixed. We're getting reports now that Leander are just coming into the bank to get that fixed, and it should be fairly straightforward, right? It's nothing huge. It's not any it's not any damage that can't be repaired, but it is absolutely vital. And again, given the conditions, the coxes are going to be hugely important for steering a line and understanding where the wind's going to be pushing them, where the tide's going to be pushing them. And without that fin, that's nigh on impossible, is it, Crossy?
Yeah, it is nigh on impossible. And so I think we've heard that the boatman for the Oxford women has got a new fin, and so the ladies will have to lift the boat up out of the water, put it on trestles where they're boating at Imperial College Boat Club, just down from the start of the race, and leave the blades on the foreshore there and just wait for the boatman to do his job. So we're all ready to bring you these pictures. But Leander, if you are just tuning in, just a reminder, we've been through the two crews of Oxford and Leander, two very strong crews that are racing each other in this first fixture ahead of the Gemini boat race. And we are waiting for the Leander crew to repair their fin, which presumably on the tideway, they must have hit something like a lump of driftwood or such like.
Yeah, and it can be quite common, I guess, on tidal bits of river, can't it? It's either that you've run ashore and clipped something in the sort of shallows of where the tide's out. And remember, we're on low tide at the moment. We should have had the lowest bit of water, I think, just after 12:30. So we're an hour on from that now. It will be raising again. But whilst they've been warming up and training, it could have been that they've clipped a shallow bit of water as they're pushing off or coming into land, or a bit of driftwood, given the storm that we've had in the last 48 hours. That would really not surprise me either. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get that fixed very soon. I suppose now, kind of coming on to what we're going to expect from these kind of two races. Do you think, Crossy, that we'll see any sort of particular rehearsals taking place? Do you think Oxford will have been told to, practice difficult steering, practice something particular when it comes to the difficult conditions? Now they've got the opportunity to do that. I'm just thinking, how can they use this bit of time to their advantage, and what do you think that their coach Andy Nelder has said to them before they've pushed off?
Well, it's a great question, that, Camilla, and you really you can't underestimate the value of these fixture races in terms of preparing for the boat race, especially up against a crew like Leander. We know that the Cambridge crew that the Oxford women will be facing on that boat race. Is it April the 3rd, the boat race? Have I got that right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
April
on
the
that,
3rd.
we know that the Cambridge crew is going to be a very strong crew with the world's number one female oarswoman, Grace Prendergast, in probably the seventh seat. So going up against a strong crew like Leander is going to give them some real practice. Clearly, the start is going to be as it will be in the boat race, minus the crowd noise. I think that's the big thing that they'll have to kind of get get used to on the day. But in particular, I think the transition off the start into pace, coming up to the Black Boy, to Barn Elms and Fulham Football Club, that bit is going to be hugely important. The race, unlike the boat race, the two races is only going to be to Hammersmith Bridge, so you don't have that sort of dig in the tank just as you come under Hammersmith Bridge round Chiswick 8. What have you got left to push? You can't practice that. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't have in their sort of lockers one big push around about the milepost, towards Harrods. I mean, by the time they get to Harrods, the Harrods Wharf, they'll already be thinking about winding up for the finish at Hammersmith Bridge. So it's going to be a little different. I think therefore the start sequence and transfer into pace is going to be the most important aspect of this race. And I'm sure Andy Nelden would have sort of emphasised that for the Oxford women. It's going to be interesting to see, because they're going to be out on the water. They would have gone through their warm-up sequence, presumably. Um, will they just be paddling around? Are they going to go through and do a warm up sequence again? Did Leander sort of cut their warm up sequence in half because they lost the fin? Will they have to go and do some new warm up? There's kind of lots of ifs and buts here.
Yeah, and I think that there's when you say ifs and buts and pros and cons, right, to both sides of things. Leander's cut their warm up short, presumably, like you've said, because they've lost this fin, so they're losing all that kind of last minute, final bits of speed, final bits of warm up that you can do whilst circulating before the start. But also, Oxford are out there on the water now, and where I am, not too many miles away, it's absolutely lashing down with rain. It's really windy. It's really cold. The boat's going to be filling up with water. They've probably got waves kind of crashing into the sides of them, and they're having to keep going and keep warming up. That could put them at somewhat of a disadvantage if they're having to, try and stay warm. They obviously can't stay dry, and they're just going to have a boat that's full of rainwater and full of wave water. So I suspect they're going to have to practice that kind of bailing. What do you do in the circumstances if it's like this on the 3rd of April and you've got conditions like this and you're having to linger?
Yeah,
Good practice.
Yeah, that's where leadership in the crew comes in. You want a few voices in the crew just reminding, these women of all the work that they've done to get here, of all the experience that's in the Oxford women's boat. I just wonder where, in terms of who's taking that leadership role, whether it's someone like Anastasia Posner in the middle of the boat, Gabrielle Smith, the Canadian Olympian, she is new to the boat race, but she's obviously got, maybe the president, Amelia Standing, is saying a few things.
Well, remember that Anastasia was in that crew back in 2016 when there was those really awful conditions where we saw the Cambridge women crew sinking, right? Anastasia was in that leading crew, the Oxford crew, that beat those conditions, that won out because they were a little bit smarter. They understood where they needed to be on the river and they'd prepared well for it. Anastasia was in that crew in 2016 that won. So I think if anyone's going to be there to give a little bit of direction, a little bit of leadership, it's someone that's been there and done it in these types of conditions.
Yeah, that's a great shout. Well remembered there, Camilla. And I do think, so much of the boat race, they train so hard, and to get their fitness levels up to compete in a really physiologically challenging event. But the mental game is absolutely crucial. They've got their sports psychologists. They're doing a lot of work on the mental side of the boat race, because it does play games with you. Things can happen exactly like your opposition might lose a fin. Do you come in? Do you stay on the water? How do you treat this? And I guess the experience is there in the Oxford's women's boat to sort of integrate this as to part of their boat race experience, and they'll look back and say, look, what did we do well, what do we need to do better? And so this is part of, for them, the boat race experience, and they'll be making the best of it. I think, it calls for leadership within the boat. I guess Andy Nelder, their coach, is out there. I wonder what he would be doing. I remember I was coaching, and it was a sort of celebrity reality TV show called The Other Boat Race back in 2004, and a crew of Oxford celebs were racing a crew of Cambridge celebs, and there was kind of a collision, and the race had to be restarted, and they were sitting around a lot in the cold conditions. And I remember I was the coach with Tim Foster for the Oxford crew, and just thinking, this is their race, they need to decide what to do. And there was lots of leadership within the crew, so I wasn't at all there as a coach for them, and I just wonder if Andy Nelder would leave the crew to sort this out. That's their experience, or he will have gone over to them, and they'll be getting directions. I would have said, probably from the boat race experience, best let them know what's going on with Leander, but let the crew get on with it, personally.
And Andy Nelder's not going to be there on the day on the water if something like this happens, say, to Cambridge before the start of the race, in April. If they have to go in, lose a fin, they've lost a fin, they have to go and get their boat repaired or whatever it is, at that point, Oxford are by themselves. And so whatever they do now, they have a trial run at it, right? They have an opportunity to react as they might do on the day, but then evaluate it, go and sit away with Andy after the sort of fixture has taken place and go, okay, how did we deal with that? Could we have dealt with it better? How would you have approached it, Andy? And I think that's, you're right. I don't think they'll be getting any sort of further input now, but maybe afterwards a bit of feedback and a little bit of reflection. And Andy's really experienced, right? Like, he supported Sean Bowden on the men's side for such a long time that you forget he's been there, and he's done boat races across all manner of years, all manner of conditions. So he'll definitely have something to say. It's just, whether the Oxford women react to it correctly, I guess, now, and how much improvement there is to be made.
Yeah. So if you've just tuned in, I was just going to say, you're watching pictures of Camilla and me, Martin Cross, Camilla Hadland, and instead we've got some live pictures, and that looks like, where would that be from? I'm not quite sure where the camera is, but I guess would that be the Cambridge crew going for their fixture?
Yeah, this looks like Oxford Brookes coming towards us, actually, which is the other fixture that's taking place today. We should probably mention that as well. These are images from the Thames balcony, and yeah, that is the colours of Oxford Brookes. Don't get confused. It is Leander versus Oxford that we are covering, but there is another fixture kicking off just after 2 p.m, which is Oxford Brookes University women versus the Cambridge University women. And you can have a look at those lineups, and we'll bring you as much as we can in terms of information on how that fixture's got on. But we'll be covering Leander versus Oxford.
Oh, that's exciting to see pictures. So if you've just tuned in, these are pictures of the second fixture, which we are not covering live. We've got, our camera is in the Oxford umpire's boat, not the Cambridge boat. Just look at those two crews there. Is that that's probably the Cambridge second boat, is it?
Yeah, we've got
second boat?
B boats as well, haven't we, for those crews? So this should be, I think, if they're lining up and coming through the bridge ready to race, I reckon this will be the B boats. You're right, Crossy.
Yeah. We'll get a look as they go past to see who's in it. But again, this is additional footage. If you're watching and you're wondering why we're not bringing you Oxford's women versus Leander, that is because the Leander 8 lost a fin out in the river. We don't know whether it sort of ran over a shoal or hit a bit of driftwood, but they're fixing that fin. And these are pictures from the Thames Rowing Club balcony. We think this is Cambridge B, the what would that be? The Blondie crew. It may not be that. It might be Cambridge A. I'm not quite sure whether it's the A or the B crew, and they're just aligning at the start against Oxford Brookes for their fixture. And we'll follow this race as much as we can with our camera on the balcony. The river's cutting up a bit. It doesn't look too rough there, though, Camilla, does it?
No, it doesn't. But remember, our camera is facing with the wind, which I think is always going to make it look more flat, because the wind is coming from the direction that this camera is sat. So it's a wind coming from the sort of west southwest. So a sort of head crosswind from stroke side. And yeah, it doesn't look too bad actually, and it will be somewhat sheltered, I guess, by the clubs on the embankment, by all the boats through this sort of section along the Putney embankment.
Yeah,
But
the
not too
tide
bad.
is starting to flow in now. I'm just sort of trying to look at the boats because it didn't turn when it should have turned according to the tide timetable. It was still flowing out, but I guess by now the river must have turned. And oh, we just lost pictures for a second there. And the river must have turned, and as it turns, then with that southwesterly wind, got the crosswinds, it's going to get a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, will get a little bit more difficult as they go through the course. Of course, not as difficult as it would be, I think, if they were going beyond Hammersmith Bridge. And I think part of the reason it's been decided that none of these fixtures will go beyond Hammersmith Bridge is for safety, right? I think the conditions, anything beyond that, will be pretty gross. But here we go. We're underway with this Cambridge versus Oxford Brookes race, and we're going to try and determine to see if this is, I think this is the B crew, because I can't see anyone in that Cambridge crew that I recognise, Crossy.
No, Brooks coming over to Cambridge on the start there, taking an early lead as well. So it's Blondie, which is the Cambridge second crew, as we thought, Camilla. And they're racing the Oxford Brookes B crew, and Brooks have got a clear lead. That's a very handy lead to have, and they're just moving out, aren't they, every single stroke?
Yeah, what a great start here for this Brooks crew. I think that must be over, well, almost 3/4 of a length now in a matter of sort of 40 strokes. It's barely been anything at all. And Brooks have really taken it by the scruff of the neck. And just trying to kind of keep an eye on the conditions. They don't seem to be struggling with their blade work at all, really. In fact, going into a headwind, it actually looks like it's tapping along quite nicely there for Brooks.
Yeah, they've got a decent bit of cover. That Strokes blade just dropping into Two's puddle in these headwind conditions, but they've cleared the Blondie crew, the Cambridge University B crew. And that's going to be a little bit of a blow for these women, isn't it? Because they will have hoped to be more competitive. You can just see that the cover's not quite as strong as the Oxford Brookes boat. Strokes blade is just dropping into the sort of forward edge of Two's puddle. And I think a little bit of a dispiriting start for the Blondie boat from Cambridge. There you can see the leaders of this B crew race. I mean, they really look like they've got some power in the middle of that Oxford Brookes 8, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And look, the Brooks program has just been developing year on year, especially on the women's side, growing. And a couple of the Leander athletes that we were talking about earlier, graduates of that Brooks women's program, and they'll be going up against the Oxford A crews. But these guys will have just started on their journey, really, and they've got the British University Championships probably in sight, and many others to tick off throughout the season. But clear water now for Oxford Brookes B. And I think that's probably sealed from the off. Not too much to report there, I guess, when it came to that sort of, second boat lineup.
Yeah, so Brooks with a length lead of Clearwater. We'll let you know how things progress, but I think for me, ahead of this fixture of the Oxford women, it looked like the water was pretty flat. That cross kind of headwinds whipping across from the sort of stroke side, the milepost side, or the Surrey Bend side of the course, didn't look to be creating sort of, humongous waves and whitecaps, the things you might expect in these breezy conditions.
Yeah, and just kind of having a look at some of the other footage that we've got that we can see through social media, I think it could be far worse given the weather conditions that have been reported. I'm actually really glad that it's not as bad as we'd anticipated, because it's meant for a nice clean start for this fixture series. So next up, I think we'll probably catch the start of the A cruise, Crossy, actually, because we should have Cambridge A versus Brooks A going up very, very soon, I suspect. And we'll catch, like we just did there with the B cruise, the sort of first couple of 100 meters of that. And that will be a really interesting lineup to watch out for. And Brooks will be racing Oxford later on in the season, I suspect.
Yeah, and we've just heard that Leander are out having fixed their fin. Both crews are quite relaxed about what's happened in terms of having to put back the start time. As we thought, these women are extremely experienced. They've got, a lot of experience in the boats, so they're going to be quite cool about it. Both crews are going to do some more practice starts and then slot in and race. And we might get to see the start of Cambridge women versus Brooks. I'm not sure if that will happen. Brooks in the B crew race. Brooks B are 2 lengths clear at the mile post ahead of Blondie. So they've continued to move out, the Brooks B crew.
Yeah, I think it was very clear from those first few shots where the advantage lay. Brooks B certainly with the strength, despite the sort of, I suppose, lack of course experience. There'll be a few people in that Cambridge Blondie crew, and we'll call it Blondie in inverted commas because, of course, it won't be officially Blondie until the crews are selected towards the end of March. But those B crews, you'd have thought that there will be a few experienced Cambridge people. They'll be used to training on the Tideway and going up for selection. And so very interesting to see Brooks with that lead. But I really hope we'll get some pictures back in just a second of some of the other crews we've got lining up at the start. I'd love to get some sight of Leander having just had that fin fix to see how they're faring.
Yeah. This is always the case with live TV and live broadcasts, that we're looking and sort of hoping that we get pictures, but we don't have pictures of the Oxford women versus Leander because the race was delayed due to a fin that was lost from Leander. And thank you for sticking with us. If you're watching, we will take you through the races as and when we get pictures. We're sorry if you're fed up of looking at pictures of Camilla and myself, Martin Cross, but this is just ahead of the fixtures that will be coming soon, and we will be bringing you live pictures of these races, and that's going to be very exciting when we get them.
One of the things I think we should actually talk about, Crossy, is some of the sort of build up to this race. And, we've been obviously having a chat about who we think will come out on top of this main fixture we're commentating on today, Oxford Women versus Leander. But we put that question, and Leander put that question out to the public over the last sort of 24, 48 hours. And interesting results, I guess, that 37% of people thought that Leander were going to win by over a length in these fixtures. That's quite a statement, I guess. 33%, so a third of people thinking that Oxford will have the same margin, so win by over a length. And then the other sort of just less than a third, 29.7% of people thought it would be much closer than that, but a result either way. So a strong statement. Almost 40% of people thinking Leander are going to come out on top here by a fairly big margin.
Oh, yes. And out of interest, just looking at pictures on social media, the Brooks leading by a couple of lengths at Harrods, and one of these big red metal buoys that chart the navigation channel. Always, wondered why they needed to put those big red buoys in. I don't think they needed to at all, but they have. And Brooks 8 hit it, but it didn't seem to detract from their rhythm, and they still lead Blondie by over 2 lengths. I think Blondie have stemmed the tide a little bit. in that B crew race.
Yes, and no, I would definitely not like to hit one of those huge metal buoys at any speed. They can definitely do some damage, and I've seen them do some damage to crews, not only, obviously not within the boat race, but in other races that take place on the tideway. So kudos to Brooks for
Ooh.
continuing. Oh, great. I think we've got Cambridge A on the left here and Brooks A on the right. I've got the Cambridge lineup, I think, in front of me. So racing for Cambridge, going from bow, we've got Alex Riddell Webster in the bow seat, Joe Matthews at 2, Caroline. Sorry, no, that's apologies. That was the B crew. We've got Adriana Perez Rotondo at bow, Quiver Dempsey at 2, Paige Baden-Horst at 3, Ruby Chu at 4, Jess Eddy coming to sub in for Bronya Sykes at 5, the Olympic silver medalist there in the middle of that Cambridge crew, doing a favour. And then Sarah Portsmouth at 6, Grace Prendergast at 7, Imogen Grant in the stroke seat, which I am really intrigued to see, Crossy, as usually you find her sort of further back in the boat in that bow pair. They've chosen to put her at stroke, and Jasper Parrish winning out over Dylan Whitaker in the Battle of the Coxes at this point in time will be guiding this A crew down the course. When they're off.
Imogen Grant, didn't she win the lightweight women's singles at the GB trials recently? And I think there was a Cambridge pair up in 6th place, Bronya Sykes and Sarah Portsmouth, that put in a good showing. Brooks coming over towards Cambridge at the moment. I don't think Brooks have taken the sort of lead they did in the B Cruise race, and hardly surprising when you've got people like Ruby Chu, Imogen Grant, and Grace Prendergast in the 7th seat. Wow, they look great, don't they? Really sharp, really on it. I think that would be Cambridge with a touch of a lead, would you say there, Camilla?
Yeah, I would agree. Just look at the blade placements. You can just about tell if you kind of measure up on the blades that Cambridge are just putting their blades in a little bit further past where Brooks are. I think they do have the advantage. We're just losing pictures ever so slightly, but we're back. And that sharpness, you're so right, Crossy. Look at that speed of the placement there. Everyone following Imogen Grant into the water, and that's certainly going to be helping them in these conditions.
Well, that is a really tasty stern pair of Grant and Prendergast in that Cambridge boat. You can see sort of if you go down from the Cox, the stroke is just in front of the Cox, but just behind the stroke is the world's #1 oarswoman, Grace Prendergast. She's been rowing a little bit longer than Kerry Gowler. That's why she gets the accolade. You can see her with the blonde hair there. So long and anchored, and almost going out to the length lead at this stage of the race by Thames Rowing Club. And just shows you how much more strong the Cambridge University women are in their A boat. This is going to be a real fillip for them, isn't it?
Yeah, they flipped that result that the B boat demonstrated in the last race. At this point in time, the B boat, it was the opposite result. It was Brooks leading by this distance, by this margin, but Cambridge have turned that around here in the A crew, and I just think they're rowing so beautifully, really upweight, not wasting anything, are they, at all around the catch, and it's giving them that sort of drive and power to take nice sharp strokes in this first 200 meters. I think that's a really smart looking outfit, Crossy.
Yeah, I think it really is a smart looking outfit. And I wonder if the Oxford and Leander crews have seen anything of this. I mean, they'll be aware their opposition are out on the water, the Oxford women. Just if you're tuned in and you're watching this, we had planned to show you the Oxford women racing Leander, but Leander lost a fin. Their race was postponed for a little bit. We'll be bringing that shortly, but this is the extra footage we're bringing you of the Cambridge Blue Boat looking great ahead of the powerful Brooks unit. I think there'll be a couple of Brooks athletes there: Alexandra Ruddle Webster, beg your pardon, Jasmine Bowen, Jessica Furness from the pair that were in the GB trials, Martha Britt and Grace Richards, also in the trials. So Oxford Brooks, they were at the back end, sort of 17th and 19th in the GB trials race that we had shortly. And you can just see Cambridge going to the milepost there, looking very, very good.
I think they've strode out, haven't they? Look at the rhythm change that we've had from that first 200 meters. It's much longer now, as they've take their bend. Then this is their advantage, as it would be if they had this station on boat race day, and they just look a lot longer now, don't they?
Do you know, when you've got an athlete like Grace Prendergast in the 7 seat, I mean, she rose so long. It's quite interesting. Did an interview with her not so long ago, and for the Ludum Rowers Conference. And what I didn't realise is she's got some kind of a scoliosis in her spine. She kind of has quite an interesting position that she rows, you know, as she leans into a rigger, but she really gets a lot of rotation, and you could see the length that, you know, she's setting up for the crew in the 7 seat. What an athlete to have in your crew, let alone in the 7 seat behind someone of the gutsy quality of Imogen Grant.
Mm. And you know, you've got to remember, so it looks like they've got a length and a half now, maybe length and a quarter, that they've just managed to eke out around their advantage on the bend. But Oxford Brookes, you say they're trialing. All of these will be university students mostly. There might be a couple of people that row for the Open Club at Oxford Brookes, but it just goes to show you the sort of difference between the kind of international level, senior level internationals that you've got in that Cambridge crew, like Grant, Prendergast, Chew, Eddie to an extent. I know you know, it's a few years ago since she's retired, but certainly she's still punching out big numbers, setting world records on the ergo. She's certainly fit, right?
Yeah.
And the student caliber just goes to show you that sort of difference. If you're the top end in Oxford Brookes, you know, they were winners of the Ireland Cup last year at Henley Royal Regatta, the new student event for women's eights at the regatta. They won that in its inaugural year. That's the top end of student rowing going up against Cambridge, and they're falling short. So it just goes to show you the quality of that Cambridge crew.
Yeah, it certainly does. And if you're interested in the results of the races, we did say we'd bring you Brookes B crew versus Blondie. In the first piece, Brookes B won by 3 lengths. So that's quite an emphatic margin over that distance. This is our camera on the balcony of Thames Rowing Club. If you know the Tideway, you'll know Thames Rowing Club. If you don't, it's one of the clubs a little way down from the start of the boat race course. London Rowing Club and Thames Rowing Club, the two sort of, I guess, kind of oldest or most traditional clubs there on the Tideway. Lovely new restaurant, a great gym in Thames Rowing Club, and that's where Ludum are based, bringing you these pictures. And the camera from the Thames balcony is looking up. Oh, we've got a finished picture there. There is, I think that's the Cambridge women just coming up to Harrods. This is an extra picture, which I wasn't sure we get. It's the finished picture at Hammersmith Bridge. And you can see they are, what, about a length and a half of clear water up on the Oxford Brookes crew, Camilla?
Yeah, about that. Obviously, Brookes will get the advantage here coming round into Hammersmith. This would be the start of the big bend if we were doing the full course, where Brookes would really want to be capitalising, but they'll run out of time if they don't act soon. I'm sure that their cocks will be calling for one last push to try and make as much of an indent on Cambridge as possible. But look, I think Cambridge looking very relaxed, and I think actually, you know, I don't know what's been said to them for their race plan, but it certainly looks to me like they're in sort of racing rhythm and now winding down.
Yeah. So maybe that wasn't to Hammersmith Bridge, or maybe the camera's just the other side of it. I don't know quite why they went. Perhaps they weren't going as far. Maybe they were going to the end of Harrods Wharf or something like that. I guess the crews will swap stations for the second fixture. But we are going to our camera on the start now to look at Leander and Oxford women. I think we're nearly there. It's happening thick and fast, the action, isn't it? We just saw the Oxford A crew the Cambridge A crew. What am I saying? The Cambridge A crew beat their opposition from Oxford Brookes convincingly. I think there was probably, we'll bring you the result when we get it, but Brookes A versus Cambridge, they were a length up at Harrods, 1 length of clear water. So that's rather more than I thought. I thought it was about half a length of clear water. So that's the result of that contest, feather in the cap for the Cambridge crew with Jess Edney subbing in. Jess raced at Henley this year, didn't she? In the double start?
Yeah, she
Trying
did.
to remember who she was racing with.
She didn't she race with Katie Greaves in the double, Crossy?
Yeah, that's a great shout, Camilla. Well remembered. Yes, she did race with Katie Greaves. And did they come up against Imogen Grant and
Emily Craig? You're absolutely right. I think they came up against them in the semi, perhaps in the Saturday. Not sure, can't remember, but definitely you're right. They did race one another. But yeah, still performing extremely well. I'm just trying to figure out who we've got on the start because I did see some Brooks blades over on the other station, but this to me looks like Oxford lining up here.
There's a big boat coming down. I don't know what that's doing. It looks like a Port of London Authority boat.
Yeah, we've got to remember they don't close the river, do they, for traffic for the fixtures? So it's it can be even more lumpy and bumpy than it is usually.
So I think we were looking at the Oxford women there, and the camera's panning back on those flats near the Hurlingham Club at Putney. If you're familiar with that, on the Middlesex bank of the river, we're looking at. And the camera panning back towards the tube that runs across the river, the District Line, to Putney Bridge Station. And both crews are having to do their warm-up a little bit sort of repeated because they had this delay with Leander losing a fin.
Beauties of live broadcast, Crossy, is that we've ended up commentating on a lot of things that we weren't expecting to, but it's been a pleasure. I'm really glad actually that we got to see a couple of extra races, you know, more so in full. I know we were going to catch the sort of start of some of those previous fixtures just for the first few 100 metres, but great to get the finish shots as well of Cambridge and Brooks.
Yeah, and we're ahead of the race. We're going to take a short break and you can watch some exciting adverts, and we'll be back just after the ads. So thanks for being with us. We're going to take a short break and see you again soon.
Get that rhythm up.
Woo! Come on, you got it.
Good.
Come on, woo! You did that.
Shop now at hydro.co.uk.
Well, welcome back to Ludum's coverage of the Gemini Boat Race Fixture Series. At last, we are getting to our main event, which is the Oxford women on the left of your picture, racing the Leander women on the right of your picture. Leander are easy to spot. If you don't know, well, if you're involved in rowing, you'll know they row with pink blades. And Oxford, of course, in dark blue. Camilla, the water looks okay, as it did for the Cambridge races, which we saw from our fixed camera in Thames Rowing Club. And we are going to be riding in the umpires launch for this race just behind the crews.
Yeah, we'll get a lot clearer idea of the conditions from the umpires launch, because the waves will be coming towards us. The wind is a headwind, the crews are going into the wind, they'll be going against that, and so we'll be able to see much more clearly if there are waves impacting. But from this shot, it looks quite calm, so I'm sure that our umpire will want to get us underway as soon as possible. A hand up in the Oxford crew that's just gone down, and I think Joe Kellett preparing his women to go off the start here in this fixture between Oxford University women in picture now against Leander Club, and a nice sharp start there for Oxford.
Yeah, you can see the ratings at the bottom of the screen. Oxford women at 41 strokes a minute, 143 500s, just getting a little bit quicker than Leander Club, rating 38, certainly in the first few strokes. But I think it might be Leander just heading off at the moment. They do look strong, Leander, off the back end of the stroke. Look at them sending that finish away. Credit to their coach, Ross Hunter. And Oxford's maybe just lagging a little bit behind in the first part of this race.
Looked like the flag was going up there, though, for some warning. I wonder who we're going to hear being warned. Perhaps Erin Kennedy there, the Cox for Leander. She, the Paralympic gold medalist, will be glad to be returning to domestic rowing. And a little bit of sort of wayward blade work there for Leander, but certainly not slowing them down at all. And like you say, I think huge finishes there that are sending this crew from Leander down the course. And you can see there from the split times, 5 seconds quicker, Crossy, for this crew from Leander at the same rating.
That's crazy. I would have thought that Oxford will be closer to Leander off the start than this, but that's a big difference. You can see with the red hair, Erin Relick, the American world champion in the 7 seat. Behind her, Gabrielle Smith, the Canadian Olympian with the white peak cap on. But, well, that is a really crushing blow, I think, to the Oxford boat. But, you know, I mean, fair play to them. They'll be racing Cambridge, and they've got to get used to these situations. And this is, you know, what's their mettle, having to race down. They're going around the outside of that first Middlesex bend, the Oxford crew and the crew closest to us with the dark blue blades. And Leander will take advantage of that start just to move away. Good course being steered by Erin Kennedy, I think, and pushing Oxford across.
Well, I don't think it's over yet, Crossy. I think Oxford's settling really well, and if you just keep an eye on these relative splits, I think Oxford have been pushing down and trying to hang on to the coattails of Leander. A little bit of a look there for Julia Lindsay in the bow seat for Oxford. I think she can hear Leander still over her left-hand shoulder, and you can see there she's calling in front to her crew just to let them know that they've still got some coverage. They've still got overlap, I think, on Leander. Yeah, look, panning across, and I think they're coming back somewhat, don't you?
They are coming back. You could look at the splits. OUBC down at 134, Leander Club at 138. So that's going to be really encouraging for the Oxford crew. The coach, Andy Nelder, will be breathing a sigh of relief. And they're doing that round the outside of that Middlesex bend, Camilla.
Yeah, great point, Crossy. You know, coming round the outside of the bend, something that Oxford will want lots of practice at, because regardless of which station, that's something that you have to think about. How can we really put them under pressure on what should be their advantage? We're looking there at Leander, Meg Slabbert in the stroke seat, the UCLA alumni, the under-23 silver medalist from Sarasota, who finds herself setting that rhythm ahead of Daisy Bellamy, the under-23 world champion in the 7 seat, and she looks really great there, backing up Slabbert, doesn't she? I think she's getting really long around the pin.
Yeah, she's getting really long around the pin. Great at the back end as well. Nice shoulder movement coming through at the finish of the stroke. The 28-year-old in the 6 seat, Susie Deere, Oxford Brookes alumni, now rowing at Leander. And I think Oxford women are edging back. This looks to be a close race. You can see the looks across from Erin Kennedy, the Leander Cox. She's looking to her left. There she is again, just checking where the Oxford women are. And that early lead that Leander Club had will be eaten into by the Oxford women. We hope we will get a look at the Oxford women shortly. There we go. There they are. They're down, but they're in contact. That's so important, isn't it, for both crews? Going to Hammersmith Bridge this race, which you can just see. Well, you can't just see. It's coming into the picture shortly ahead of us. We'll see it in the distance, but what a great fight back from the Oxford women.
Yeah, and I think maybe a little bit more cohesion in the Leander crew. I just saw a little bit of a look over the shoulder there again from Gabrielle Smith, the Canadian you mentioned, Crossy, the Olympian from the double sculls in the white cap. You can see her. She's just taking check on where Leander sat, and I don't know, a few heads popping either way in Oxford. I think they just need to keep the blinkers on a little bit and row their own race. But they are coming back. That's certainly an improvement. And Oxford will have practiced rowing over the distance of the whole course, whereas I feel Leander, they're going to be prepping up for regatta season for 2,000 metres. And this race is about so much more than that.
Yeah, I think, whatever the result for this race, the Oxford women will be pleased to take something out of it. And, they'll have learned not to get, to put some pizzazz into their start. This is the first of 2 pieces we're going to be bringing you. We're looking at Annie Izakis closest to us, and then behind her, the American world champion in 2018, Erin Brealey, Gabrielle Smith, the Canadian Olympian. Just to look across there, Camilla, you were mentioning that. Heads in the boat, Gabrielle, Anastasia Posner behind her. And then I think she got sunglasses on her head, Anna Zephyrs from the American. Olivia Farah, she looks small, quite small there. She's subbing in for a lightweight, Christine Cavallo in the Oxford boat, but Olivia in the 3 seat, then Amelia Standing, the president, in the 2 seats, and Julia Lindsay up at bow, and the Oxford women trying to fight back against Leander.
They've been building in speed, Crossy. I've been watching the boat. It's been picking up, and I think they are going to be coming. Oh, I think they've got the lead now, coming into their bend, coming into Hammersmith. Wow, what confidence is that going to have given them to row through Leander? There's quite a lot of space between these 2 crews, are there not?
Sensational. Oxford getting warned there by the umpire, but what a sensational second half of the row from Oxford. As we see, I think this is the finish camera we're looking at, and you can see Oxford on their bend have got now half a length of clear water, and that is a real fillet in the cap for Oxford. They are going to be so stoked with that race, to actually be down, to have to row behind Leander and then to come through is going to be so motivational, isn't it?
Look at that. They've just been picking up, and they've just catapulted themselves now into almost a length lead. And it's taken a lot. You could see on their faces, it took a lot of eyes out of the boat. They needed to kind of get a sense of where they were. And I'm not sure whether that's the sort of tactic they should be going for against Cambridge on race day, but certainly, taking it all in. A lot of these athletes won't have raced in this environment on the tideway against opposition from outside of Oxford before, so it's all an important learning curve. Still a little bit of overlap. Leander trying to throw everything they can into these final few strokes. I think we are going to finish with less than a length lead from Oxford, but I'm really impressed there with Oxford's response to that.
Yeah, the race is to Hammersmith Bridge. We're sorry we're getting interruption in these live pictures, but there we go. That's what it's like on television. You can get the picture. Oxford University women being warned as they come up to the finish line of this first fixture. We've got another one to bring you. Crews are going to row back to the start over again. And Oxford have crossed Hammersmith Bridge. They just wound down there, didn't they? And well, that was a very, very convincing second half display by the Oxford women against Leander Club. I guess the verdict was something like 3/4 of a length at the finish.
Yeah, we'll await. We'll get an official verdict, I'm sure. We've got a few secret elves sat on the finish for us, feeding us the results, the official kind of take. We'll get those in just a second. But yeah, I just feel, I don't know, when they went off the start, Oxford just looked a little bit kind of without that bit of yeah, you're right, tentative, without that bit of pizzazz. And I think Leander really knew they had to get off strong, but they just ran out of gas, and that's important for a course that will span, near on 20 minutes for Oxford, to ensure that whatever they start off at, they can continue on at that pace.
Yeah, and we're just getting the verdict. It was 3/4 of a length, as we thought, that the Oxford women beat Leander by. They were, I guess, they were down. I thought they were 3/4 of a length down off the start, something of that margin. If they weren't, it was quite close to it, 2/3. I think it was more than half a length.
Do you know what was really difficult to tell, though, was they were so far apart? You know how we used to seeing crews kind of running with blades weaving in and out? I don't know whether it was Erin Kennedy on the Leander side or Joe Gellert on the Oxford side, but they seemed to be like almost a boat could sandwich in the middle of them. They were miles apart.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting point that you made there, Camilla, about how far apart the crews were. And I don't know quite whether Joe Gellert was being careful, and it looked like Erin Kennedy was pushing the Oxford crew across a little bit there in the start of the race. And Joe was just keeping his crew clear. Perhaps, he'd been. We heard Andy Nelder say in the interview that we saw from Row 360's coverage of the trial eights that he was really pleased with the positional awareness of the Coxes, of both Coxes, and Joe Gellert coxed that style crew to a win in the trial eights last month. So the former Hampton schoolboy at St Anne's studying chemistry has got to know what he's doing. But they had a nice run, didn't they? On they started sort of just that Middlesex bend unwound. They started to move back, while they were on the bend, which was impressive. And I just wonder, with the Leander crew so chunky off the start, I wonder what happened to Leander, really.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'm just thinking about if I was sat in that Leander crew and I saw a crew sticking with me on what is meant to be one of the best advantages on the course for that station, right? And seeing Oxford sticking with them and not letting them go anywhere, lassoing them and then reeling them in, you're going to be losing confidence. And if you've used all your adrenaline and used all your energy to take those first big 20 strokes, and then you're hanging on, and the crew that you've beaten off the start are starting to come back when it's your advantage, I just don't know whether it was a motivation thing or whether they just kind of lost sight of how close it really was, and that they were coming back and then they left it too late. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. Both crews will have feedback from their coaches who were in launches watching the race. Andy Nelder for Oxford and Ross Hunter for Leander. And, clearly, I don't know. I'm not sure you can go off too hard in races like this, can you? I mean, you go off the start and you get into your rhythm. They look to be in a really chunky start rhythm, Leander. I guess Ross Hunter's going to say to them, maybe your pace through the middle, you've got to work on that, and capitalise on it. And the Oxford coach, Andy Nelder, is going to probably want to see Oxford be a little bit more competitive off the start and see if they can, be in a more advantageous position to capitalise. I guess the crews will swap stations for the second piece. So Oxford will have Middlesex and Leander will have Surrey. But it'll be interesting to see if the coaches do give feedback in terms of, which bits of the race to improve next time.
Yeah, and I think the swapping stations it's not like they can go and then directly improve, because each station requires different kind of tactical steering by the coxes, tactical calling by the coxes, and responses. So they can't just map exactly what they've just done with the feedback over and do exactly the same thing again. That they're going to have to think differently about how they'll approach each of those bends, and what they'll do in the opposite, if it's going to happen to them in a different direction. Oxford could be up in this next race, and it's how do they then push on and row away, or potentially deal with Leander coming back at them. So it's not going to be a sort of direct feedback, put it into practice. It could be a completely different scenario altogether, which I find absolutely fascinating about these fixtures.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, we've seen our footage, admittedly, from the Thames balcony, not from behind the launch of the Cambridge women racing, who were impressive against Brooks. We thought they looked really good. But then we've seen the Oxford women come back in that first fixture against Leander. I would say that bodes for a pretty decent boat race. Just, I'm just putting it out there. It's the first time, but basically, could these be two well-matched crews?
Yeah, I think arguably, Leander is probably the stronger crew out of themselves and Oxford Brooks. If you look at their opposition on paper side by side, Leander to me has got a far more weighting for when it comes to experience, when it comes to sort of athletic capability. Brooks will be a well-drilled unit. That's one thing that I think would put them at an advantage. They'll row as a crew far more probably than Leander will. But we're coming up to Eights Head, women's Eights Head will be in just a few weeks' time. So I suspect both will have been practicing in their crews a lot more than they would throughout the rest of the season. But to see Cambridge as far up as they were against Brooks, but Oxford to come back at a stronger crew like Leander, you sort of, cross-reference both of those things. And you're right. I think the answer comes out in that on average, I think it's going to be a really good race for these women's crews come the 3rd of April.
Just to let you know, these things going on live TV, our coverage from the Thames balcony camera is temporarily out for the moment. Our techie man, Ian Weir, and those of you involved in rowing will know Ian very well, London Rowing Club oarsman, is working on a fix. But we will bring you the results of the other fixtures when we get them. If you are just tuning in to this Luton presentation of the first fixture between Oxford University Women's Boat Club and Leander, well, we've seen the result of the first race. The crews are now paddling back from the finish at Hammersmith Bridge, so that'll take them. I guess what would it have? The piece would have taken them sort of 7-8 minutes, or something like that, and it'll take them 15, 20 minutes. So,
they'll be with the wind at least at this point, Crossy. They'll get blown back a little bit, even if they are against the tides coming in, which it will be now. So they'll be racing with the tide, but it does mean they have to paddle back against it. At least they've got a bit of wind to help them out. And I guess, whilst we've got a bit of time and we're waiting for those crews to come back into shot, we showed you a little bit of footage earlier from the Oxford Trial 8s. We saw Cambridge going up against Oxford Brooks just a moment ago. It would be great to reflect back on what we missed in December, then pushing back into January to have a look at how Cambridge got on in their Trial 8s.
Probably the closest we get to having real life practice before we actually get to the boat race.
The first opportunity we get to race the boat race course in the right direction.
We really want to see as close racing as possible.
The best chance of exposing them to every eventuality that could happen in the boat race course.
Out of the start, there was a lot going on. It was quite hectic.
There was so much more going on than I anticipated in the blade clashes that we had in the first like 30 strokes.
That could have really rattled the rest of the crew, but everyone really pulled together.
I think we had one of our closest margins in my 8 years today.
Definitely a bit of friendly rivalry.
Especially when you're racing people that you train with and you know what their strengths and weaknesses are.
I was actually pretty nervous.
Also like a lot of pride on the line.
It's just been wonderful to be back, and we were blessed with some nice weather.
A big event, and it's one that we all get excited about as a squad.
The next 3 months will be really important for us just to focus in on ourselves and then put ourselves in the best possible position come April.
So thanks to Row 360 for those pictures of the Cambridge Trial 8s. Were their boats Buzz and Woody? Is that right? Were they the dogs of Paddy, their coach?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you're correct. I mean, so close. Like those clashes, it just goes to show you what can happen on boat race day. And it was fantastic hearing the Olympians that have come in from New Zealand, like Ruby Chu and Grace Prendergast, talking about how it was so much more than they'd ever expected it to be, that all of those noises and everything they had to focus on suddenly became a reality. It's just great to hear it from the horse's mouth, I guess, that it is as complicated and as distracting as everyone says it is.
Yeah, just to let you know, races are going on as we're talking. We've temporarily lost our pictures from the Thames balcony camera, which is going to be fixed, I'm reliably informed. But Osiris, that's the Oxford women's second boat, were racing Leander B. And I saw Leander B and Leander A doing something on Insta, which, you know, was fairly close. But Leander B were leading off the start and a couple of lengths of clear water ahead of Osiris at the milepost. So if you're watching this and wanting to know the result of that race, it looks like Leander B beat the Oxford women's reserve boat. Of course, we saw that fantastic race. It was a fantastic race where the Oxford women rode through Leander, the pride of Leander's women in their A crew, and they couldn't hold off that Oxford surge pretty much over the second half of the course, I would say. And really excited to see if Oxford can maintain that advantage, and you know how much motivation these Leander women will take from that defeat to reverse it. It's going to be an interesting second race, isn't it, Camilla?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued as to whether especially the start, right? Because like we said, I think the one part where we were a little bit unsure of how Oxford were performing was those first 20 strokes, and whether we see them change that in this next piece to try and either stick with Leander and match them, you know, because Leander looked extremely strong, right? We thought it was a really a really fit and strong crew, a lot of sort of pulling power, a lot of what's going down in that Leander crew, and whether Oxford should be trying to beat them off the start or actually just going, do you know what, if we can stick with them, that gives us a couple of extra seats, but really where our strength lies is our endurance, being able to row through them in the latter stages. Let's not try and mess too much with our start, and actually that's exactly where we want to be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, and I'm sure that we'll get a clear idea of how they've evaluated that once we see them take their first few strokes.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I think looking at those, you know, the stories in the Oxford women's crew. You know, Erin Relick, that 2018 world champion. She kind of lost out from the Olympics being postponed a year. She was in that American women's squad, and you know her results weren't going as she liked it, and she took the brave decision to walk away from the sport. You know, she'd been right at the front end. She could have had a seat possibly in the American Women's 4 or American Women's 8. But she walked away from Tom Tahar's squad, and kind of fell out of love with rowing, and now she's come back to Oxford, and she's kind of like fallen in love with the sport again. Really, it's great to see that.
And quite a similar story, I guess, 2 seats behind her with Anastasia Posner.
Yeah.
Such an unfortunate kind of tale for her, getting COVID just after a really successful set of trials on the build up to what would have been the 2020 Olympic Games that then ultimately got postponed. But we lost Anastasia from the sport throughout that year. We then didn't see her in the squad for the games in 2021, despite having a sort of European silver medal under her belt in the women's 8. Various A final finishes at the World Champs in Sarasota in 2017. I know she was in that women's 8 that made the A final there. So I think another story much like that further back in the boat, and for somebody who, like I said in the introductions, is probably the most decorated blue across both camps, both the sort of open side, the men's side and the women's side. Great to see her back, and great to see her, in this top crew, and hopefully enjoying it, enjoying being back in the Oxford setup. Studying a degree like medicine, I know that she, obviously years and years worth of work, you've got to really enjoy it, haven't you, to put yourself through the hours of a medicine degree, but also training for something like the boat race on the side.
You have, haven't you? Imogen Grant's also doing a medical degree, and they're full on study. And I think for some of these women, or a lot of them, that are that are sort of got really demanding degrees. Rowing is a release from that, and you go down early in the morning, you get your session done, and it's kind of you don't have to think about your studies so much. It's motivational. You're with your crew, you've got the camaraderie, then you go off to your studies, and then you are back in the mix again for the second session. We just are getting a few results through. We'll let you know that Leander B lead Osiris by about 2.5 or 3 lengths. I think that's the end of the 5-minute piece. And Brooksby and Blondie this time are racing. That's the Cambridge Reserve women are holding contact with Brooksby. Brooks will warn for steering there, about 3/4 of a length in front. So Blondie, it looks like, have got their act together. We did see that race come down, the first race come down from the Thames Rowing Club camera, which is temporarily lost its signal at the moment. So we're working on that and hopefully fix it. But at the moment, Blondie having a little better of the second fixture, in as much as they got contact with Brooks round to Barn Elms.
Yeah, and I think they've swapped stations. Just having a look at some of the footage that we've been given, I think we've got them on opposite stations, and Brooks will then have a bit more of an advantage around that bend in towards Hammersmith that might open out a little bit more distance over Cambridge. But you're right, it looks like a bit of a better response from Cambridge B or Blondie. As I say, I'm always reluctant to call them Blondie or the Blue Boat before we've actually had them selected, right? Because there's still so much longer to go. We've still got over 4 weeks until the actual race day. And that crew selection can change anything up to, and in previous years, in fact, in recent years, up to the morning of, right, Crossy?
It can, and that's happened. I think I do remember, who was it?
Josh Bigowski in the Oxford crew, wasn't it? Was quite recent.
Yeah. The Oxford Brooks B crew against the Cambridge Women Reserve crew, Blondie. Oxford Brooks B now have a 1.5 length lead just past the milepost. The milepost is one of those markers on the boat race, or indeed actually on the head of the river race coming the other way, which has got a monument to Steve Fairburn, the famous Cambridge and London Rowing Club coach of the 19th and early 20th century cruise, and the milepost was a monument in his honour, and it's there forever on the boat race course. So we are waiting for the sort of Cambridge versus Brooks A fixture, the second of those two races to start. We'll let you know. We'll hopefully be able to bring you some pictures if we get this camera back up and running. But we will definitely be bringing you pictures, so don't go away, of Oxford University women's top crew racing Leander's top crew for the second time. It was such a great race. If you didn't get to see it, if you just tuned in, this is a Luden presentation of the Gemini Boat Race Fixture Series. I'm Martin Cross. With me is Camilla Hadland, and we're talking you through this afternoon of the first boat race fixture series. And we've already seen Cambridge get the better of Oxford Brooks, but impressively we saw the Oxford women down off the start against the might of Leander. They looked so strong, didn't they, Leander? And then row through them to take the victory by about 3/4 of a length.
Yeah, so strong. And I'm actually just looking ahead to some of the fixtures that we've got in coming weeks. Of course, today we've seen the Oxford women go up against Leander and Cambridge go up against Oxford Brooks. But that all turns on its head on Sunday, the 6th of March, where hopefully we'll be back covering with Ludum some of the fixtures that are going up on that day, which will be the Oxford Derby, in fact, Oxford going up against Oxford Brooks, and then Cambridge women will take on Leander. So we'll get that direct comparison that a lot of people use to benchmark where they feel, they're putting their chips on the boat race. Crossy, will get almost a sort of week by week direct comparison on how Cambridge then fare against Leander if it's the same crew lineups. And then looking on that same day, we'll also have the men racing Leander, Oxford men racing Leander, and Cambridge men will go up against Oxford Brooks. So a huge fixtures day on Sunday, the 6th of March. I cannot wait already. I think putting the men into the mix as well, Crossy, that's going to be some really big punch-ups there.
It is going to be some really big punch-ups, I think, for the men. And I'm really stoked, after having watched the women today, to see the men out for their first fixtures against, the might of Oxford Brooks and Leander Club and so on. I think, and who is it that's coming over? Is it the crew from Nearhouse that's coming over? Are they racing Cambridge?
Yeah, we've got on Monday, the 21st of March, we've got the Cambridge men's blue boat at that point. So it will be selected at that point in time against the Dutch under 23s that are coming over. So those are the guys that usually come over and race Henley Royal Regatta and so on and so forth. And they've been partial to coming over for a fixture in the past, I believe, as well, and always tend to perform extremely well. So that will be the Cambridge men's blue boat as it is selected on Monday, the 21st of March against the Dutch under 23s.
Yeah, they row extremely well, those Dutch. We've seen them in Henley finals. A lot of input from the top Dutch coach who was working with the quad this year. Just his name's just gone out of my head. What's his name? Ilko Meerhol, Diedrich Simon. That's it.
Well done, Crossy. I was about to say, don't look to me. I can't remember.
No, the guy, he got into trouble from sort of telling his crew, look, the umpire's warning you, and their crew got disqualified in the final of the ladies. But that's the standard of these Dutch under 23s. They row really well, really slick. And that's going to be a fantastic contest between them and Cambridge.
We do also have Dutch interest coming over on the women's side as well. On Sunday, the 20th of March, we'll see the Cambridge women's blue boat. Again, at this point, it will be a selected blue boat going up against Neerhouse. So you were right, Crossy. Neerhouse returning once again. And I think they enjoy coming over for the fixtures. We do see them quite a lot, but my word, the caliber of those Neerhouse crews is always extremely high. And a lot of the sort of Dutch under 23s and even Dutch senior internationals come out of that Neerhouse setup over in the Netherlands.
Yeah. Oh, now this looks like a camera for the launch, and that is the Cambridge University CUBC women's crew, their A crew, you can see Grace Prendergast, the distinctive rowing style of the world's #1 oarswoman there, just paddling down to the start. Thames Rowing Club in the background where the camera is not working that we have. Oh, there it is working.
Magic touch, Crossy. We've got it. As opposed to the commentator's curse, you've actually healed it with your words. There you go. We've got those pictures back, and that looks like Oxford University A coming over the horizon, ready to start this next fixture.
Yeah. So
we talked about that the Cambridge Women's A crew, and as I say, we've not really. We were only covering the first couple of minutes of this in lieu of the fact that we don't have Leander and Oxford at the moment. But we talked about Jess Eddy subbing in. What a great sub to have on hand from London Rowing Club in the middle of that Cambridge A crew. I've been reliably informed that it will be quite good practice for her to be back out in an 8 on the Tideway. As hot off the press, the women's Rio 8 that won that great silver medal back in 2016 is actually going to be reuniting for the women's Head of the River this year, Crossy.
No.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
Whoa,
I've got a source who's tuning on the live streams, and they've said can't wait to be back racing in that crew. And so Jess is going to get a bit of Tideway experience ahead of the rest of them. And that'll be fantastic to see them taking on this course.
At Cambridge, you know their colours, don't you? If you're not familiar and you're tuning into this presentation, Cambridge are in the light blue on the right of your picture, and they are racing Oxford Brooks A crew on the left of your picture. Just one result to give you: Cambridge Lightweights, or one race, Cambridge Lightweights and Brooks C crew. The Cambridge Lightweights had half a length on Brooks C crew just before Harrods, which was after about 6 or 7 minutes of the race. Brooks Cox has got her hand up, just straightening the Brooks boat. Cambridge look prepared. Cox's hand is down. And we will shortly be underway in this, I guess, for us, unscheduled pitch race of the second of 2 contests today. The first, the Cambridge women look really, really strong and beat Brooks by a decent margin. There, crews are off. A little bit tentative off the start by Oxford. Crews moving together very quickly.
Yeah, this is going to be a really close one, and already warnings coming from the umpire for Cambridge. And that Cambridge crew, as we said, being coxed by Jasper Parrish, knocking out Dylan Whitaker, who coxed last year's blue boat. A really good challenge for Jasper to take on here in these very intense situations, and still being warned. And Brooks look like they have the upper hand at this point, Crossy.
Yeah, Brooks had the upper hand. Very aggressive coxing. Really interesting because Cambridge moved away off the start. This is a much closer race, and I think it's going to be really good for the Cambridge crew to have to row down a little bit. You know, they're down on their bend, and Brooks have been really chunky off the start, really aggressive. You know, that shouldn't worry Cambridge, because if they get into the same rhythm that they did in the first piece, then they are going to see off the Brooks 8. But Brooks have been really aggressive off the start. I think Cambridge are now moving back on them every stroke. I mean, they're just into a better rhythm, I think.
Yeah, you talked about the aggressive coxing coming from Brooks. I think they're being coxed by Harry Brightmore, Crossy, which would, I think, explain. And there he is. You can see him just in the right-hand side of your picture. And a very, very established cox, currently trialling for the British coxing seats, going through all of that process. And an Oxford Brooks stalwart to have multiple championships under his belt as a cox, and plenty of experience on the Tideway too. So that explains the aggressive coxing.
Yeah, and I think Cambridge just moving back through, Cambridge on the left of your picture, just moving back through, Brooks on the right of your picture as we head up. Cambridge are on the outside of that bend, so they'll have their work cut out. But they do look a nice front-ended crew, don't they? Just really got them well set up as they come into first part of the stroke. That stern pair combination, you mean that's to die for. Imogen Grant and Grace Prendergast in the stern of that Cambridge boat. Very, very strong combination. Ruby Chew in there, back in the 4 seat, the New Zealand international. And,
Cambridge still being warned though, Chrissy. I think that must be kind of warning 4 or 5. That's the sort of 5th time we've seen that white flag come out from the umpiring launch, and telling them to keep sticking over. They need to come back to the Surrey bank, which, well, I think they probably will be a little bit miffed by that, considering that they want to be in the stream. They want to be where Brooks is, really. And Harry Brightmar doing a great job to keep Brooks, in the best water.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tree in the way, obviously. I think Brooks are not letting Cambridge go in that race. Cambridge women against the might of Oxford Brooks, and they've really taken advantage of that Middlesex bend. And you can see the pictures of Brooks just powering away. I think, if we're lucky, we will show you the finished pictures, but, well, it does look as if Cambridge, I was going to say who's leading at that point. I think Brooks probably might just have the advantage on the Cambridge women as we move around to the milepost.
Unsure. I think Cambridge still with the advantage. If I'm just looking at the sterns there, I think it is just Cambridge, but Brooks have definitely come back on their bend, and also Cambridge probably a little bit shaken by the amount of adjusting that the Coxes are having to do in the Cambridge boat. But yeah, definitely levelled up much, much closer than that previous race.
So we're now looking at the sort of crews warming up for the start of the 2nd instalment of the Oxford women versus Leander. Leander B just won the
once again, if you can pedal down together,
2nd of 2 fixtures against Osiris, the Oxford University Women's Boat Club B crew. And both crews paddling down to the start. Oxford have now switched stations. They now have the advantage of the first bend as it goes around to Middlesex towards Fulham Football Club. If you know the tideway, the River Thames, the stretch from Putney through to Hammersmith Bridge. So Cambridge and Brooks are in a tight race. We're getting reports on that race, which we've just been watching.
Joe, if you take your crew under the middle of the arch.
I think that's the voice from John Garrett, the umpire, if I'm not mistaken. Rode with John in the Seoul Olympics, and he's a regular umpire for the boat race events.
Yeah, the pool of umpires that they use and that they select have all attended either university. And this is good practice for them as well as it is for the athletes as well.
Yeah, and crews yet to come down to Putney Bridge. It's going to be so interesting to see what Ross Hunter has said to the Leander crew, whether they're going to be more conservative off the start and have a little bit left in the tank to hold off the Oxford surge, or whether that Oxford surge has taken their endurance away, Camilla. And, Andy Nelder would say, being closer contact off the start, but how much will it have taken out of the Oxford women to have to row down the Leander?
Yeah, I think it would have taken a lot out of them. Although I must say that it did look comfortable. It didn't look like a scrappy chase from Oxford. It looked controlled. It looked like it built rather than it being a scramble. So I hope that was planned, and we'll see in just a few moments' time.
Oxford, Leander.
Hands are up in both crews.
Cambridge women just beat Brooks by half a length in their fixture, if you're interested in that result.
Attention! Go!
Rapid underway, and it looks to me like Oxford staying nice and calm through these starting few strokes.
So this is Oxford A against Leander A. You can see the Oxford crew closest to us, Annie Anzakis, Erin Reelick just behind her.
That's a big start from Oxford, Crossy.
Yeah.
I think that they've really learnt their lesson there. Look, they've got the advantage now, and they've given themselves so much more space.
You were talking about the distance between the crews, Camilla, in the first
Leander!
a lot of distance between the crews there, aren't there? There's there's no danger of crews clashing. We did just hear Leander getting warned. That's our camera from Thames Rowing Club, which is back up and working now. And Oxford are really, well, they've really responded to what we think is Andy Nelder, their coach's call. Much closer to Leander off the start. Or maybe Leander are trying to be clever, and Ross Hunter said, you know, let's use the pace on the transition and let's have something left for the second half of this race.
Yeah, both crews racing 36, 37 off the start, pretty consistent across both crews, but it is Oxford, you can see, who have got the advantage only just as they come together. They're sort of forging together now through this next 100 metres or so, and actually I think we're going to have some overlap on bow side for Leander that they're going to have to watch out for. This is a true boat race style fixture, plenty of drama maybe to come, but Oxford here holding pace and now running alongside Leander rather than down at this point.
Yeah, I think Leander have got something like a third of a length. You can see the splits. Oxford have just gone down to 129. We've got this technology from Leander which is giving us this information of the 500 metre splits, distance travelled of both crews and the rating, and you can see Oxford University women just going a little bit quicker than Leander, and the Leander Cox, Erin Kennedy being warned, Oxford quite far over to that Middlesex bank.
Yeah, but yet Leander being warned, so let's keep tabs on it, let's keep eyes on, and I think in the last few strokes actually Leander have put in a little bit of a push as they've come down onto rhythm, and they've just got a blade advantage there. You can see that last bow side blade of Annie Campbell-Ord just hitting the water ahead of Julia Lindsay's in the Oxford crew, and I think it's maybe, oh gosh, 1 seat to Leander with Oxford's bend yet to come.
What a great race, isn't it? Just early on, Oxford getting a better run off the start than they did in the first contest earlier this afternoon, which they were down by quite a way against Leander and then came through. You see Leander there, those finishes not looking quite as strong as they did off the start in the first piece.
Do you know what, Crossy? I was just thinking the same, but they're throwing that away a little bit, aren't they? Meg Slabber in the stroke seat, she's moving the hands really quickly, whereas before I think we saw them drawing through and giving it the time, and actually they're chasing it now that Oxford are up alongside them and rattling them.
Yeah. Oxford quite close in the front ends. Yeah, they've got a really good deep finish there, the Oxford crew. Definitely really well poised. Erin Reelick in the 7th seat, just setting the boat up really nicely. And Erin Reelick, of course, she spent the first part of her life in New Zealand. She rowed for the United States, but she's eligible to row for New Zealand. And she's quite friendly with Grace Prendergast, the Cambridge 7 woman as well. So setting the boat up well for Annie Izakis in the stroke seat to set that rhythm going.
Less head turning in this this crew now, because that was the one thing we called out for Oxford in the last race. There was a lot less looking at the boat. Just as I say that, commentator's curse. Both Gabrielle Smith and Anastasia Posner looking across to Leander, but certainly far less of it. Now, still overlap. Leander have still got the door open here if they want to try and put in a bit of a push before Hammersmith, and Oxford having to battle with a little bit of wash here. Look at that bump on the blades, Crossy.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Both crews, move apart! Both crews, move apart!
Move apart, yeah. So we still haven't had a blade clash yet. The umpire's trying to keep on top of it. Leander up at 36 strokes a minute. Oxford at 36 strokes a minute, and Oxford just edging it. You can see edging it on that speed split below. Got some really powerful women in the middle of that Leander, really laying it down. Izzy Powell, Izzy Hawkes, Susie Deere in the 6th seat. Sunglasses on. Wouldn't have thought you need sunglasses today, actually, but Daisy Bellamy.
Leander!
On too.
Lots of shouting from the umpire, and I think perhaps I don't know how that would feel if you were in the crew and you were powerless to do anything about it. They've just got to leave that job down to Joe Gellett for Oxford and Erin Kennedy for Leander. It's completely out of the crew's hands, and all this shouting, they just have to block it out, because otherwise it'll impact the rhythm, it'll impact how they're racing. Oxford at the moment just can't shake Leander, can they? They just haven't got that pair of scissors to snap off that elastic band.
I think it took a lot out of them, that finish at the other race. Leander are going to be really psyched by this, and they will be right there at the finish of this race. And it's Leander's bend just coming down to Hammersmith Bridge. So we're going to see a close finish in this race. Leander splits down to a ridiculous 1:19 there, and Leander are really going for it. 37, Oxford up at 37, 38. I'll tell you what, if Oxford hold off Leander, that'll be a fantastic day's racing for them. But I think Leander might just be
Leander!
Yeah, this bend now that Leander have got in their favour, they'll be very thankful for as they are closing in. It'll just give them that bit of a boost that they need. Coming round, it'll be Erin Kennedy that can now see Hammersmith Bridge. She'll be telling the crew that. She'll be telling Meg Slabbert in the stroke seat just a few more strokes and we are closing in on our advantage. And they're hanging on. They've been up at 36, 37 for this whole course. Perhaps still just a little bit bouncy crossy, just a little bit sort of, rushed up the slide, but certainly the grit and determination is pushing through the splits down and down. And Oxford, I think, have just responded there.
Oxford have responded, and they have a slight lead. What is it? About a quarter of a length, third of a length as they come round to Hammersmith Bridge. Still the advantage with Leander on that bend as we go round to. Crews go round to the right of the picture, but it's Oxford who will emerge victorious in this first race. What a great day for the dark blue women as they shoot Hammersmith Bridge, and they have won by about, what is it, say quarter of a length, third of a length. That was a great day for the dark blues. The Leander crew exhausted.
But look, I think great day for Leander as well, right? That's a really solid crew, and some of the names that we've got in the Oxford lineup this year, they'll be, I'm sure, pretty pleased to have come away with some great racing experience, but also to be so close to a crew that's got a heap of international experience in.
Yeah, I guess they're going to take they're going to take quite a lot from that race. You can see the weight there. Both crews paddling down, just winding down. Clearly, I think both Cambridge women, who we saw race the first part of their race against Brooks, and Oxford, who we've just seen race Leander, will take an awful lot from this fixture. I mean, it would be so valuable in terms of their boat race training. And the Oxford women are going to be so psyched. First time for Erin Relick on racing on the Tideway in an 8. So she's got that experience under her belt. Smith and Posner, the powerhouses in the middle of that Oxford boat, really shown that, they've got what it takes in the second part of the course. And, Annie Azakis sending it up the Aussie in the stroke seat. So, everything points to a really close boat race, women's boat race.
That's what we love, isn't it? And I can't wait for it to be back on the Tideway. And with the caliber that we've got just after an Olympic year, it's all poised to be quite the show, something that we've missed after such a long time. So, look, I think great result there. Final result, a quarter of a length there to Oxford. So really tight stuff, really tight racing, and a great marker in the sand, I suppose, for all the fixtures moving forward now on both sides. We'll catch up with the next set of fixtures in just a couple of weeks' time. Sunday, the 6th of March, will be the next set of fixtures. We'll be here again, bringing to you some of the action. But Crossy, any kind of final thoughts, I guess, from today's race, other than I think we're going to have a very close contest on the 3rd of April?
Well, I think, the excitement of seeing racing on the Tideway, of seeing the fixtures. Normally, if you wanted to watch the fixtures, you had to either get on a launch or pedal down furiously on the towpath on the bike. And it was just so excited to be there in the heart of the action, to have all the kind of data. It was great racing. I think, extra treat for us to get pictures of the Cambridge women racing Oxford Brooks. They look pretty good, pretty, technically precise. And I think to see, I thought when Leander went off, I just thought, it's their race. I was almost ready to call it after the first minute of the race, and how wrong I would have been to do that, because, we saw what the Oxford women were made of. Set up fantastically well for the rest of this fixture series and for the women's boat race on April the 3rd.
Well, we will we'll look forward to the next few weeks then as we continue on with the fixture series. Sunday the 6th of March being our next, and then continuing through Saturday the 19th of March, the 20th, Sunday the 20th of March, completing the fixture lineup on Monday the 21st of March, just a week or so ahead of the main event that will take place on the championship course on the 3rd of April. I've been Camilla Hadland. I've been joined by Martin Cross here for this Gemini Boat Race Fixture Series event powered by Ludum, and we cannot wait to see you back again for our next event very, very soon. Thanks very much.
Get that rhythm up.
Woo! Come on, you got it.
Good.
Come on, woo! You did that.
Shop now at hydro.co.uk.